Hunted in the Appalachian Mountains. 7 bears disappear as a sinister presence is revealed. In the shadowed heart of the Appalachian Mountains, fear lurked like a predator. Hunted in the Appalachian Mountains. 7 bears disappear as a sinister presence is revealed. The headlines screamed, rattling through the sleepy diner where weary patrons hunched over their coffee. But for Sarah, a single mother and exhausted waitress, it was more than just another story, it was a warning. As whispers filled the sticky air, her heart raced. Nobody believed whispers like this were nothing but drunken tales. But even in the daylight, shadows twisted like danger, and she felt it tightening its grip as night fell. The diner dimmed and the scent of fried food mingled with a heavy tension. Mia and Jake sat at the worn booth, their faces illuminated by the flickering neon sign outside. "Mom, did you hear about the bears?" Mia asked, her voice low. "They just vanished." The words echoing in Sarah's mind felt like ephemeral smoke, swirling into darkness. She nodded, forcing a smile, but dread pooled in her stomach. Once in the cramped trailer, the walls creaked and the wind howled like a haunted ghost. Sarah tucked her kids into bed, but the rest of the night was a continuous cycle of listening to tiny disturbances, a rustle, a thud, and the faintest sound of growls. No amount of fatigue could drown her fear. Her dreams were filled with shifting silhouettes and the growl of unseen beasts. Paranoia clawed at her mind, driving her to check the locks, to peek outside into the dark void of trees that choked their home. Days dragged on, and whispers turned to frantic murmurs. Dogs went missing. Cats returned as hollow shells. She felt the eyes of the woods watching her, tracking her every step. She clutched her kids as if warding off the very air around them, each beat of her heart echoing her growing dread. The sheriff, a friend turned indifferent, brushed off her complaints. "It's nature, Sarah. Don't you worry about it," he said, waving her off like a pesky fly. But she felt it. They were in danger. Something was brewing beyond mere animal instinct. And then came the night when Jake didn't come home. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the clock ticked mercilessly forward. He ventured into those woods, curious as always, drawn by lures of adventure, the whispers beckoning him closer. A scream churned in her chest as she bolted outside, the shrill chirp of crickets a mocking audience to her terror. The moon hung low like a ghostly eye, but the woods loomed darker. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With dread coiling in her stomach, Sarah stepped forward into the trembling embrace of trees. Each step echoed with memories, her father's stories of the woods alive with evil. Branches clawed at her arms as if trying to pull her back, whispering secrets best left unheard. Deep in the stripped woods, the air thickened with something unholy, and her heart beat thunderous in her chest. She stumbled upon symbols etched into bark, twisted and ancient, signaling dark rituals she only heard whispers of over an empty bottle. The woods were alive, breathing malevolence into her veins. Then, just beyond her sight, a shadow moved large and heavy, rumbling with a growl that froze her blood. It was a bear, yes, but something more ominous, otherworldly. Her spine tingled as she sensed it lurking, the woods closing in around her. As the ground trembled beneath her feet, Sarah realized with icy dread that in seeking safety, she ventured deeper into terror. The predator was not merely hunting bears. It was hunting her, and it knew her name. Sarah felt the weight of those dark woods bearing down on her. Shadows danced between the trees, flickering with a life of their own. The growl echoed again, rumbling like distant thunder, tightening the knot of dread around her heart. She turned slowly, trying to find the source, but the darkness was thick and consuming. "Jake!" she screamed, her voice cracking, lost in the abyss. No answer came but the chilling sound of her own heartbeat drumming in her ears. With every breath, the wood's oppressive atmosphere clawed at her, filling her lungs with a suffocating sense of foreboding. The symbols on the trees seemed to pulse, blackened etchings alive beneath her gaze, each curve and wiggle a pulse of something ancient and vile, something that belonged to the shadows. Another rustle nearby sent her heart racing. She spun around, her instincts urging her to flee. Yet her feet remained rooted, weighed down by fear and the realization that the woods were no longer just landscape. They were a maze of terror. She had stepped into something far beyond her understanding, a realm where rules twisted and prey became the hunted. And then she heard it, a soft whimper, barely discernible over the rustling leaves. It was Jake's voice, muted and strained, calling from just beyond a curtain of trees. Panic surged through her, and she moved toward the sound, branches scraping against her skin as she pushed through the underbrush. "Jake!" she yelled, her throat raw, desperation lacing her voice. "Where are you?" But the darkness swallowed her call. The blue moonlight spilled through the treetops, illuminating patches of the forest floor, creating deceptive pools of safety within a sea of shadow. Each patch grew smaller, the treetops seeming to bend closer in, narrowing her escape routes. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught her eye, a massive figure, barely visible within the darkness, advancing towards her. It was hunched and too big to be an ordinary bear. Its outline shimmered with an unnatural glow. A bone-chilling growl vibrated the air around her, a resonance of something primeval and fierce. Sarah's instincts kicked in. She turned to run, branches snapping beneath her frantic feet. She couldn't let it catch her. She had to find Jake. The shadows chased her, whispering her name, yet she pushed through, breathless and wild. Jagged rocks tore at her shoes as she tripped, crumbling to the ground. Pain radiated from her ankle, but terror propelled her forward. "Jake!" she screamed again, louder now, begging the forest to respond. For something to reply, that a sound broke the quiet, a low, deep growl that shuddered through the ground, sending her heart racing. A terrifying realization gripped her. It wasn't just one bear. She wasn't alone. The forest was alive with unseen eyes. They were all watching her, with every ounce of fear pushing her onward. She reached a small clearing. And there, amidst the tangle of wild brush, she found a small figure curled against the base of a tree. It was Jake, eyes wide with terror, mouth trembling, trapped in wide-eyed horror. But before she could rush to him, before she could scream his name, the air shifted. Something large loomed behind her. The earthy smell of wet fur filled her nostrils. There it was again, the growl reverberating inside her chest, primal and hungry. "Run, Mom!" Jake's voice was filled with fear, urging her to escape. But it was too late. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, yet she stood paralyzed, caught between the horror of the unknown and the instinct to protect her son. What had come for them? What was unfolding in this twisted heart of darkness? And then she realized, it wasn't just the bears vanishing from the woods. The forest hungered for more. With her heart pounding in her ears, Sarah turned to face the horror, breath hitching as she took in the colossal bear standing before her, eyes gleaming with an intelligence that chilled her to the bone. It wasn't just hunting. It was waiting. A whisper floated through the trees, brushed past her ear. A promise wrapped in malice. You can't escape what was coming next. Darkness shrouded her vision as terror enveloped her, but she felt a fierce resolve ignite within. In the depths of the woods, the hunt was far from over. And deeper in the shadows, a sinister ritual awaited for blood. The ground trembled slightly as the creature shifted, its enormous frame obscured by the veil of night. Sarah could only manage to breathe in short, shallow gasps. There was no denying it anymore. This was not just a bear. The creature's fur glistened under the scant light, revealing patches of blacker than night that seemed to meld with the shadows. "Mom!" Jake wailed again, pulling her from her stunned silence. His small form shook, the fear etched on his face sending a fresh wave of urgency through her veins. But what could she do? In a moment, 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, paralyzing her further. She had to protect him, but how against something so monstrous? The bear no, it was something else stepped forward, its eyes glowing fiercely. They weren't the eyes of a mindless beast. They were conscious, filled with something darker. Intellect, a predatory cunning that chilled her. "Jake, stay behind me," she shouted, forcing her voice to sound more resolute than she felt. But it was too late. The creature lunged, its massive jaws snapping just inches from her face. She threw herself to the side, adrenaline pumping. Panic was a living thing inside her, clawing to take control as she landed hard on the forest floor. The pain in her ankle flared again, igniting her senses, but she crawled desperately toward Jake. "Run!" she screamed, panic spilling over into sharp cries. She watched helplessly as her son froze, paralyzed by terror. The creature turned, eyes flickering toward him, and in that moment, she saw the realization dawn in its gaze. This was the prey it sought. "Jake!" she cried, panic surging anew as she pushed herself off the ground, forcing herself forward even as the shadows closed in. A surge of desperate energy propelled her toward him. She grasped his shoulders, shaking him slightly. "We need to move. Now." The darkness buzzed with strange noises, the rustlings growing louder, circling around them. It felt like the forest itself was alive, writhing to form a barrier between them and freedom. "Mom, it's here," Jake's voice quivered as he pointed behind her. A chill ran down her spine as her heart dropped. The creature's growl deepened, resonating from somewhere dark within its chest. "Get up," she shouted, pulling him up with her. But the ground shook again, and from between the trees, more shadows emerged. More creatures. Trapped. The forest felt smaller, pressing in on all sides as if the trees were closing ranks, blocking any potential escape. Sarah's throat felt tight, a scream bubbling just beneath the surface, desperate to unleash itself. She could see them now. Glistening eyes blinking, shapes shifting, illusions formed from darkness but unmistakably real. The air vibrated with low growls, a symphony of menace wrapping around them. "Run!" Sarah shouted again, urgency spilling into her voice, breaking through the fear that wrapped around Jake. He took her hand and they bolted, running as fast as they could through the underbrush. Behind them, the growls erupted into frenzied snarls, echoing their frantic flight like a living nightmare. Just as they broke free from the thicket, something heavy crashed down behind them, uprooting trees, tearing the air with its noise. It was a thunderous sound that sent tremors through Sarah's body, and she dared not look back. They stumbled into a small clearing, moonlight spilling down like a beacon of hope. But the hope faded as they realized they weren't alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, twisting and writhing, faces obscured and movements grotesque. Were they human, or something else entirely? "Mom," Jake's voice trailed off, filled with dread as they stood there, frozen. Sarah felt a tug at the connection between them, a force pulling the very essence of their being. A silent chant echoing through the trees. The whispers that had followed them turned into a sinister chorus, chanting her name, Jake's name, beckoning. With her heart thundering in her chest, she saw it clearly. Wolves. Not like any wolves she had ever known. Their fur shimmered, a silver mist, with eyes that glimmered like the bear's, filled with the same intelligence but more. And hunger too, a ravenous hunger. They were not just there to hunt. They were there for something deeper, something dark. "Where do we go?" she breathed, despair washing over her, and the answer rattled through her, chilling her blood. As the pack began to encircle, the forest growing darker still, the words echoed once more. "You can't escape." The clearing seemed to close in, shadows reaching for them as the sinister pact of the woods tightened its grip. What would they want with them? What awaited those who lost themselves in this cursed expanse? "There has to be a way out," Sarah murmured, her mind racing. Yet the shadows pressed in closer, ready to claim their prize. Could they make it? Would something ancient rise to feast upon their fear? And that primordial whisper clawed at her, hinting at the gruesome answer. The hunt was far from over. The wolves closed in, their eyes glinting like polished stones, and Sarah felt the edges of her sanity unraveling. The encroaching shadows woven into their forms seemed to pulse with life, as if the very darkness hungered. "Jake, stay close," she hissed, gripping her son's hand with a white-knuckled intensity. The chill seeped into her bones, and the air crackled with fear. Would they feel the dry brush of her desperation? Would they smell her terror? The lead wolf, larger than the others, stepped forward, its gaze locked onto her, piercing through the haze of panic. It emitted a low growl that resonated in her chest, vibrating like a warning bell. Was it the queen of this nightmarish pack? All instinct told her to run, to flee to the safety of the trees, but those shadows had twisted the forest into a maze. Then she heard it, a soft chant wrapped around her. The words slithered through her mind, maddening in their familiarity. Sarah, Jake, names whispered like pieces of a dark puzzle. "They know us," Jake squeaked, terror shimmering in his blue eyes. She could already see the doubt creeping in, questioning if escape was even possible. "We can't stop. We can't think. Just follow me," she urged, starting to drag Jake back toward the edge of the clearing. But the pack circled tighter, their growls rising in a chilling crescendo, echoing through the trees like the heartbeat of the forest itself. The haunting whispers intensified, warping into savage laughter. "Join us, come play." Those words felt like fingers curling around her throat, squeezing tighter. The shadows lunged, playful yet fierce, taunting them with glimpses of ghostly figures flitting between the trees. Sarah's heart raced with desperation. "We have to fight back." She looked around for anything, branches, rocks, anything she could use. But where was the old trunk she'd seen earlier? It was lost in the chaos of her terror. "Mom," Jake whimpered again, pulling at her sleeve. "What do we do?" "Remember the flashlight?" "In my bag." Jake nodded, fear glimmering against a spark of hope. "I'll get it." He darted back toward the shadows where they had dropped the backpack. The wolves didn't move, fixated on Sarah, amusement dancing in their eyes. "Get it. Hurry." The call of the wolves resonated around her, a symphony of malice that seemed ready to swallow Jake whole. The lead wolf stepped forward, its massive head tilting with arrogance. "You think light can save you? It is the dark that gives power. Embrace it." Its breath fogged the air, warm against the coolness of the night, a mockery of reassurance that chilled Sarah's bones. "Jake!" she yelled, her heart tightening. The wolves mirrored her alarm, shifting ever closer, anticipation lacing their movements. It felt like an eternity, but he finally emerged from the shadows, chest heaving, backpack clutched tightly in his arms. Trembling, he fumbled with the zipper, eyes wide, the glow of the full moon spilling over him. With a flick of his wrist, the flashlight flared to life, spilling bright light into the darkness until the beam sputtered, flickering as if it, too, feared the shadows. The pack recoiled slightly, but only for a heartbeat, then surged forward, undeterred and gnashing their teeth. "They're not afraid," Sarah shouted, panic surging anew. The light was dimming, and she could practically feel the hunger of the wolves wrapping tighter around them, pulling at their very souls. With a surge of courage, Sarah took a step forward, ready to defend Jake. "Stay back. We need to move." And then the ground beneath them bucked, something monstrous stirring deep in the earth, shaking the entire forest, rattling the trees as if demanding attention. "What?" The confusion danced in her thoughts like a strobe light, and in that moment, in the chaos, they saw it, the towering form of the bear-wolf hybrid, fully revealed now, darker than the night. Its maw cracked open, pearly fangs glinting in the frail light. Each breath it took seemed to echo with the rich scent of decay and darkness. "Run!" Sarah screamed, but the urgency in her voice fell away, lost in the pervasive dread creeping over her. As they prepared to flee, the shadows stirred around them again. "You're already part of us, no escape." More figures emerged, shifting shapes full of malevolence, the grim realization sinking deep. The hunt was far from over, but now, it wasn't just their fear being feasted upon. What if the shadows lurking in the corners of the forest were not just hunting them? What if they meant to draw others into this nightmare? And as the chant grew louder, closing in like a funeral dirge, a deafening howl filled the air. The pack surged, primal instinct overpowering their hesitation, looming with one intent. How long could Sarah resist the inevitable pull of darkness? The earth shook again, sending tremors through Sarah's legs. The darkness pulsed around them. It felt alive, hungry. The chant grew louder, almost drowning out the frantic beat of her heart. Every instinct screamed for escape, yet all paths seemed lost in the thick shadows, twisting and shifting like a living nightmare. "Mom!" Jake's voice cut through her panic, pulling her back. The beam of the flashlight flickered like a dying star, casting an eerie glow that barely penetrated the suffocating thickness. A fight-or-flight instinct surged within her. Instinct urged flight, but her heart was heavy with the desire to protect. Then she saw movement amongst the trees. Shapes, human shapes, twisted and grotesque. Figures pulled from the darkness, faces obscured but eyes glinting malevolently. They emerged like spirits taken hostage by the night, their mouths moving in unison with the chant. They sang of fear, of despair, yet their bodies danced with joy, the joy of the hunted. "Jake, we have to move." Sarah's voice cracked, the fear mingling with urgency. She grabbed his wrist and pulled him along, hoping to outpace the encroaching figures. But the shadows stretched longer, wider, melding the forest into a dark tunnel with only the wolf's eyes shining like candles in the black. The lead wolf remained a constant tormentor, its growl echoing through the shadows. "Join us," it beckoned, its voice a low rumble that resonated deep within Sarah. "Join the unending night." "No!" she screamed, clutching Jake tighter, dread ichor pooling in her veins. They turned in what they thought was a direction, leaping through undergrowth and upturned roots, breathless. The light flickered again, sparking briefly against the dark, and for a split second, she saw the faces again, faces twisted in ecstasy, craving flesh and fear. "Mom, I can't run any longer," Jake panted, his small body trembling from fear and exhaustion. Distant howls echoed from beyond, each one a reminder of their perilous odds. She couldn't let fear consume him. "Not now. Just a little further. We have to find the road," she urged, gripping his fragile hand as they stumbled through the darkness. As they bolted past a massive tree, its trunk twisted like a serpent, the world erupted into chaos. A deafening roar crackled the air, both a warning and a challenge. The bear-wolf hybrid, colossal and ravenous, surged forward, eyes brimming with unholy desire. Sarah's stomach churned. The creature's presence felt like a thick, tar-like fog, suffocating and overwhelming. Right when she thought hope was withering like the dying light, a rustle came from the thickets in front of them. She dared a look. Another figure emerged, a man cloaked in tattered rags, eyes high and wild, a lurid grin breaking through his dirt-streaked face. "Over here," he barked, waving them closer with a skeletal hand. A moment, a heartbeat of indecision unfurled. Who was the stranger? A savior, or merely another shadow weaving closer to their doom? "Mom, please," Jake whimpered, pulling her arm. He was still trembling, but confusion flickered in his gaze. The man beckoned again, urgency cracking his voice, and the wolves growling crashed like a wave behind them. The depths of the forest closed in, harsh and unwelcoming. "Run!" the man yelled, absolute fear pouring from him, revealing the truth of his desperation. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to trust him, a nameless hope stirring deep within. Without another thought, they dashed toward the man, hearts pounding. As they approached, the shadows fluttered like angry bats in the night, the wolves howling in protest. The man pointed towards a narrow pathway, a faint glimmer of light at the end. But the lead wolf lunged at her, snapping its jaws just inches from her back. Instinct propelled her forward, but a split second of hesitation hung thick in the air. Had they truly escaped, or did they only leap from one nightmare to another? The last howl echoed around them, an unsettling vibration through the trees. And somewhere amid the chaos, the remains of the chant coiled back into the dark. They were fleeing, but at what cost? Was the real danger lurking just beyond their sight? As they vanished into the narrow path, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was still waiting for them in the shadows. What had they awakened in the heart of the Appalachian woods? And with a shuddering breath, she realized the questions had just begun. What was the man hiding? The path twisted underfoot, an unwelcoming tunnel swallowed by shadows. Sarah's heart raced in time with Jake's frantic breaths, each pulse of terror urging them forward. Just moments before, they had narrowly escaped the claw of that monstrous wolf. Now, the air felt thick with dread, laden with the kind of silence that follows a storm. "Where are we going?" Jake gasped, glancing up at the strange man leading them. His eyes were wild, darting toward the trees, and the half-moon cast a ghastly light on his dirt-smeared features. "The light! We must reach it!" The man snapped, panic lacing his voice. "They won't follow you there." Sarah's instincts warred within her. Trust the unknown, or stay with her frightened child. The thought of leaving Jake behind painted her insides with crippling fear. But the man pointed, and the faint shimmer of pale light beckoned through the grasping branches. "Mom!" Jake whined, his small hands squeezing her like a life raft. "I don't want to go with him. Just a little longer, Jake. We're almost there." Each word felt like a desperate promise. They pressed forward, pushing past reeked branches and snapping twigs, fleeing the horror that lurked behind. Suddenly, the ground dipped, and they stumbled into a clearing, where the moon illuminated a grotesque sight. Scattered remnants of animals, bones bleached white as spectral fingers. The smell was overpowering. Damp earth mingled with the sharp tinge of decay. She covered Jake's eyes, fighting the bile rising in her throat. "What is this place?" she whispered, dread creeping under her skin. The man paused, casting frantic glances around. The growl of the predator echoed in the distance, vibrating against the trees like a tolling bell. He stepped closer to Sarah and Jake, his eyes wide, filled with an unholy fervor. "This is where it happens, where they take them." "Who? Who takes who?" she questioned, voice quaking. "The lost. The ones that enter the woods like you." He gestured wildly, his gaze piercing as if assessing them for some unseen flaw. "Once you've seen the truths hidden here, you can never leave." The chant drifted through the branches like smoke, slow and sinister. The figures she'd seen earlier intertwined in her memory, their dance, their mouths twisted in delirium. "We have to keep moving," she hissed, tugging at Jake. But the man's grip tightened on her shoulder. "You don't understand. They can smell your fear." Suddenly, the howls grew more defined, rising in terrifying harmony. The ground beneath rumbled once more, and the shadows clawed closer, creeping out from the edges of the light. Sarah felt the pulse of the forest shift, pressing down upon her, a darkness that hungered for them. Jake whimpered, his small body trembling. "I want to go home, Mom." The man's eyes darted, finally landing on a gnarled tree, its twisted limbs reaching out like skeletal fingers. "Behind that tree. It's our only chance," he shouted, desperate urgency coloring his words. As they turned to run, a horrific shriek pierced the air, splintering the night into sheer terror. It wasn't the wolves this time. It was something deeper, something worse. "Go, now," the man yelled, lunging for the tree. They dashed toward the gnarled roots, but before they could reach safety, a massive form burst from the darkness, blocking their escape. All at once, everything went cold. The hulking figure loomed above them, eyes gleaming with hunger, teeth like daggers bared. "Join us, join the unending night." A scream lodged in Sarah's throat, paralyzing her, but before she could react, the man shoved them away. "Don't look back. Run." The darkness swirled, and the howls rose into a frenzy. They had entered a nightmare, but this was only the beginning. As they sprinted towards the sheltering tree, Sarah wanted to scream, wanted to fight, but all she could feel was the icy grip of terror gripping her heart. What was coming for them now? With a final glance behind, the man vanished into the shadows, consumed by the very darkness he had warned them about. Were Sarah and Jake running towards safety or deeper into the folds of horror? Whatever lay ahead, they had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back. and as the shadows closed in behind them, she realized the night was just starting to wake. What other horrors awaited beyond the next bend? The air grew heavier with every frantic step they took, shrouded in an impending dread that squeezed at Sarah's chest. The gnarled branches of the trees reached out, skimming her arms, as if trying to pull her back into their dark embrace. They were alive, whispering of horrors yet to unfold. "Hurry, Mom," Jake urged, his voice thin with fear. The moonlight flickered like a heartbeat, an uncertain guide in this wild maze of nightmares. She held tightly to his hand, dragging him through the underbrush, dodging the gnashing teeth of shadows that snapped dangerously close. "Stay close," she shouted, panic cracking her fragile composure. Each raw breath tasted of iron and earth, each sound a rustle. A howl made her nerves spark with terror. They were being hunted, and the forest was alive with the pursuit. Nothing about this place made sense. It twisted her perception of safety into something grotesque. A figure materialized in the distance, shifting out from behind the twisted trunks. A woman, crouched low, her hair a tangle of dark vines. She was bloodied, caked in dirt and despair, murmuring to the ground like it possessed the answers Sarah needed. The woman's eyes snapped to them, frantic and sunken. "Don't go any closer," she screeched, her voice a frayed whisper. "You must leave. They come for you." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of movement whispered through the trees. The howls had morphed into a guttural chorus, rising and falling like a wave of black water, hungry and unrelenting. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Jake, we need to keep moving." But the woman reached for her. "You can't escape. They know your scent. They know your fear. Let her go," she snapped, dragging Jake further away, dread pooling in her stomach. They had no time to waste on warnings or madness. Yet, the weight of her words lingered in the air, ominous and suffocating, rushing through the thick foliage. Sarah could feel the ground tremor beneath her feet, as if the forest itself was alive, breathing down her neck. She could hear it now, the chanting, echoing like a sinister heartbeat in the darkness. The howls crescendoed into a maddening symphony, each note a death knell. They ducked beneath a low-hanging branch, the scent of wet earth overpowering. Then it struck her a flash of fur in the shadows, a ripple of movement just at the corner of her eye. Always watching. A terrible realization dawned. It wasn't just wolves. The forest was a cauldron of nightmares, brimming with souls trapped between worlds. The lost. The chanting rose through the trees, a beckoning, a taunt, twirling like smoke around them. "Mom, look out," Jake cried, pulling her back, but it was too late. Something lunged from the darkness, all fangs and gleaming eyes, snapping its jaws inches from her face. She pushed Jake behind her, adrenaline surging as she felt the breath of the beast against her skin. It backed, shifting into the shadow, and for a moment, there was stillness, the air charged with expectation. "Run. Keep running." The words tore from Sarah's throat as she turned, pulling Jake with her into a headlong sprint. The rhythm of their footsteps thrummed against the earth, punctuated by the howls that now pierced the air without mercy, growing closer. Just ahead, an old wooden cabin shuddered in the wind, hints of light flickering from within. Hope flared for a moment, a lifeline. Could they find safety there? "Mom, what if it's a trap?" Jake's voice was barely above a whisper, soaked in uncertainty. "Trust me, Jake, we have no choice." They dashed towards the flickering lights, heartbeats racing, dread soaring. And then, for the briefest of moments, the howls quieted. An eerie silence fell, draping over them like a shroud. The shadows danced, twisting around the cabin, waiting for them to cross the threshold. But the darkness did not rest. It pulsed, hungry and vibrant. Whatever lay ahead, Sarah felt the grip of fate tightening around them. As they reached the cabin door, it creaked open, revealing depths darker than the night outside. Sarah locked eyes with Jake. "On 3, we go. 1, 2. But what could wait on the other side? That question gnawed at her as they braced for the unknown, the silence now louder than any howl. What horrors awaited them inside? The door swung open with a slow groan, revealing a gaping abyss within. A chill wafted out, wrapping around Sarah and Jake like icy fingers. Shadows clung to the corners in defiance of the flickering candlelight that sputtered weakly from an old lantern on the floor, casting eerie shapes across the walls. It felt as if the cabin itself were alive, breathing, waiting. "Mom, we should just come on." Panic shot through Sarah, cutting off Jake's protests. She pulled him inside, the thud of the door slamming shut echoing in the cramped space. The sudden darkness engulfed them, stifling. They stood in silence, hearts thumping loudly in the heavy air. The howls outside seemed muffled now, but there was an unsettling calm that screamed that they were not safe yet. The ground beneath them felt uneven, like the very wood of the cabin was alive, shifting underfoot. "Are we trapped?" Jake's voice quaked, wide eyes darting around the room filled with dust-laden furniture and heavy curtains that seemed to sway on their own, whispering secrets. "Just let me think," Sarah murmured, struggling to find clarity amid the chaos that spun around them. Her instincts screamed that they had made a mistake in coming here, yet the forest had promised worse. As she turned her attention to the flickering lantern, something caught her eye: multiple scratches on the wooden table, etchings that looked disturbingly like claw marks. Just as she leaned closer, the lantern's light flashed wildly, illuminating something dark in the corner. A painting hung crookedly on the wall, its colors dimmed and aged. It showed the very cabin in which they stood, surrounded by twisted trees and a blood-red moon. But the faces of the figures depicted were obscured, as if the artist had tried to forget what had once been known. "Mom, what's that behind you?" Jake whispered, fear clenching his throat. Without turning, she felt a heavy presence pressing in on her, a suffocation that whispered warnings of unseen watchers. Her heart raced, and she pivoted, bracing herself. A figure flickered in the fading light, a tall, thin shadow standing just outside the door, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. It was too still, too quiet, like the calm before a storm. Sarah's breath caught. It seemed to absorb the darkness around it, its features shrouded in an aura of despair. "Get away," she shouted, but the figure did not move, did not blink. "Mom!" Jake cried, panic spiraling. "What is that?" In a cacophony of chaos, Jake shoved her aside, racing back towards the door. "We have to get out." "No!" Sarah screamed, but it was too late. By the time she lunged for her son, the door had swung open with a screech, revealing only the forest's black maw howls bursting forth like the wails of the damned. Something lunged at Jake from the shadows, swift and silent. Her instincts screamed louder than the howls as she tackled him, the two of them tumbling backward into the cabin, crashing to the dusty floor. The figure slid inside, moving with an unnatural grace, its long limbs stretching impossibly. Long fingers reached toward them as if to pluck them from existence. The air was thick with fear, drowning. Sarah grabbed Jake and scrambled backward, clawing across the floor as the shadows seemed to converge, swallowing the last flicker of light. Then, suddenly, it all went dark. "Mom!" Jake screamed, his voice swallowed by the void. But something dark loomed, hovering just beyond the reach of their memories, the promise of the forest closing in around them as their screams faded into silence. What would become of them now? In that stillness, a familiar howl echoed from the depths of the forest. It sounded like a call, reminding them that whatever had been unleashed was still hunting, still waiting. Could they still escape? Or had they walked straight into the arms of terror? The shadow shifted, waiting for answers as the air crackled with dread. And then, a voice, a low hiss, broke the silence. "You only delay the inevitable." What had they awakened? And who exactly were they running from? Darkness wrapped around them like a shroud, smothering every inch of light and hope. Sarah could feel her heart racing, pounding against her ribs like a frantic animal desperate to escape. The silence held thick, suffocating. The faint sound of the candle flickering had died entirely, leaving only the harsh sound of their breaths echoing in the emptiness. "Mom, what is happening?" Jake's voice quivered with fear, and she could hear him fumbling beside her. The overwhelming sensation of dread seeped into her bones. "Stay close," she murmured, reaching for him, her fingers trembling as she clasped his hand. The air stirred, faint yet palpable, and she could sense movement just outside their proximity. Was it the creature or just shadows playing tricks? The feeling of being watched clawed at her skin, forcing her to glance nervously into the dark corners of the room. Suddenly, the shadows shifted. An unnatural rustle came from the back of the cabin, drawing her attention. She squeezed Jake's hand tight, pulling him closer. "We need to find another way out. There's got to be," before she could finish. A low growl reverberated through the cabin, a sound that was so deep and guttural it churned her stomach. The figure, that tall, thin shadow, stirred again, now moving closer, drawn by their fear. A whisper of a laugh echoed in the air, it pierced like ice sliding down her spine. "Did you think you could escape?" it hissed, a voice like crumbling leaves, a chilling blend of malice and amusement. "No, get back," Sarah shouted, rising to her feet and instinctively moving Jake behind her. She could see no eyes, but she felt them drilling into her. The very walls felt like they were collapsing inward, suffocating, confining. The door remained wide open, offering an escape route, but it dared not beckon. The forest beyond was a realm of unknown horrors, and the lingering howl promised more than just fear. It promised death. "Mom, we need to run," Jake pleaded, his small body trembling violently beside her. "Shoo, listen." She pressed a finger to her lips, her ears straining to pick out any sound amidst this suffocating silence. But her heartbeat drowned out all else. Then, there it was again, another whisper, closer this time. "I can smell your fear," panic surged, knotting in her stomach. "We're not afraid. We're not," she yelled defiantly, but deep down, she felt the truth of her own lies. The figure swayed ever so slightly, teasing her senses, a living shadow. She knew they had to act quickly, to make a choice: face the creature or plunge into the dark, unpredictable forest. Every instinct urged her to run, but the irrational part of her hesitated, still hoping for a better way. Then she saw it, a glint of silver from an old rusted axe resting on the wall. If they could just— "Jake, help me," she commanded, lunging toward the weapon, hoping it would give them a fighting chance. As she reached for the axe, the creature howled, a terrible sound that made her blood run cold. The shadows lunged forward, forces unseen but very much felt, moving with speed that pinned her to the ground. Jake's scream drowned under the weight of despair. In that moment, as darkness enveloped them, they knew fear had transformed into something more monstrous. "Help us," Jake's voice whined, barely audible. Then silence washed over them, heavy and final. Their only lifeline was hanging by a thread, the fate of both hinging upon a choice made in the dark. But what awaited them outside? Another desperate attempt at survival or an into the grasp of nightmares. The forest alone held the key, and it beckoned once again. "What will you choose?" It was a whisper that felt too close, too probing. Sarah's breath caught as a single clawed hand extended toward her, and she suddenly realized there was no going back. Would that hand bring salvation, or was it just the promise of further doom? The darkness laughed with hunger, and the air trembled, waiting for an answer that might seal their fate. The shadows inside the cabin twisted like sentient beings, alive with malice and hunger. Panic gripped Sarah's heart as she wrestled with her thoughts, trying to stay focused on protecting Jake, even as the looming figure continued to advance. The air crackled with tension, every heartbeat resonating with fear, every pulse tightening the cords that bound them. "Jake, stay close," she shouted, forcing her trembling legs to shift her weight toward the door. The creaking of the cabin walls felt like a warning, but she had no choice. Breathless, she grabbed Jake's arm, sensing his small body quaking beside her. Suddenly, a series of violent howls erupted from the depths of the forest outside, sharper and more menacing than before. The sound crawled across her skin, wrapping around her like a death sentence. A flicker of determination ignited in her chest. They had to fight. With trembling hands, Sarah lunged for the rusted axe, its weight reassuring in her grasp. The moment it touched her palm, a flicker of hope ignited, pushing aside despair. "Get ready, Jake," she called, spinning to face the approaching darkness. But the figure paused only briefly, as if sizing up the threat before it. A sharp whisper sliced through the cabin, clear and cruel. "You think you can fight darkness? You are already part of this night." It hissed, laughter dripping like poison from its words. Before she could respond, the shadows lunged forward, multiple forms surging through the doorway. The cacophony seemed alive, eager to devour. With a scream choked in her throat, Sarah raised the axe above her head, a wild desperation guiding her swing. The blade cleaved through the thick darkness, sending a shatter of light into the inky void. The shadows screamed an echo of rage that resonated through the very bones of the cabin. For a moment, a brief moment, the darkness receded, revealing faces twisted in anguish. They were truly lost, abandoned phantoms of the woods. But how many lost souls lingered in this cursed place? They seemed to writhe, yearning for release. "Mom, we have to go," Jake cried, his urgency snapping her back to reality. In that instant, Sarah caught sight of the door, their only way out. Without hesitation, she grabbed Jake's hand and bolted for the exit, the axe clenched tightly in her other hand. As they flew through the doorway, the howls echoed behind them, growing furious as if the woods themselves were enraged by their escape. They plunged into the dark forest, the cacophony of snapping twigs and heavy breaths surrounding them. Every shadow felt like clawing fingers trailing close behind, threatening to pull them back into the void. "Left! Mom! Go left!" Jake yelled, fear etched into his small face. His instincts were primal, collected from the years of hearing tales spun in the safety of their home. But as they veered into the thick brambles, Sarah felt it, an ancient presence closing in, suffocating. The trees seemed to conspire against them, contorting into impassable labyrinths. Shadows flickered and danced, whispering threats and taunts, drawing on their desperation. "Keep moving," Sarah screamed, pushing forward as adrenaline surged. Each step felt like a heartbeat drumming against the still of the night, but the darkness was relentless. Then light, a distant glow peeking through the underbrush, broke the suffocating grip of despair. "There," she gasped, charging the last few paces toward the glow. As they burst through the final thicket, Sarah was blinded momentarily by the brilliance of a clearing illuminated by the full moon, its rays casting a silver blanket over the land. They fell to the ground, a tangle of limbs, breathless and consumed with terror but alive. "Mom, are we safe?" Jake whimpered, clinging to her. I don't know," she replied, the weight of uncertainty still heavy in her heart. But as they looked around, the clearing seemed free of shadows, free of the haunting howls. The trees stood tall, silent guardians witnessing their flight from the abyss. For the first time, the air felt lighter, almost comforting. Yet the forest loomed around them in stillness, a reminder of the dangers waiting just beyond the edge. Sarah wrapped her arms around Jake, pulling him close to her heart, feeling each pulse beat in his small body. Maybe we can find a way home," she murmured, hopeful, yet cautious. With a surge of determination, she rose, holding Jake's hand tightly as they walked together toward the edge of the clearing, ready to face whatever lay ahead, to reclaim their lives from the grip of terror. And as they took their first steps away from the shadows, the woods whispered one last time, a chilling promise slithering through the branches. You can't escape. But in that moment, with the moon blazing above and determination fueling their hearts, Sarah chose to drown out the darkness with the light of her love and resolve. Together, hand in hand, they stepped from the nightmare, bound for freedom. You need to subscribe now. Don't miss the next exclusive stories that could take you deeper into the rabbit hole of horror. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the dark tales thriving. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. It helps us grow. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. They'll be haunted and grateful.